Hello, my loves, and welcome to this week's episode. This week I am joined by an amazing guest expert. Honestly, I have followed this person for so long, and I was gassed when she came on the podcast because, let me introduce her. So you may follow her on Instagram. It's Kinzie Madsen, and she is a business coach. So Kinzie is a vibe, even her name is like a vibe, but her brand, she is just so unapologetic. She does such cool, vibey content because she's into like graphic design and like really creating visuals that stand out and represent who she is and just being creative with her platform. And I love that. So if you go on her Instagram, you will see what I mean. Like if you scroll down, she just has like different vibes for things. She is a writer, moneymaker, someone who is business obsessed, and she also says that she is that cringe girl boss, which I love. She helps women make lots of money in their businesses and just be their most authentic self. So in this episode, we go into all of those things like side hustles, we go into starting a business, we go into being authentic online. And it's just such a good episode. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So, Kinzie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you here because you really are like one of the coaches that I just look at on social media and absorb your content, and your vibe is just like epic. It's a bit
thank you so much.
So introduce yourself for people listening.
Yeah.
What is it that you do?
Yeah. So I'm Kinzie. I call myself like an energetic business coach because I do like business coaching, focusing on marketing and branding, but it's really about like the energetics behind the things. And a lot of the strategies I teach and help my clients with, it's a lot about like, just kind of like how the actions you take are going to reflect success in your business, or the opposite if you're taking them from a place of like not full embodiment and not full confidence. So that's kind of what I help people with. Like I said, I focus on branding and marketing just because I think it's like the funnest part of business, and I think it can create the most success. So yeah, I've been doing it for 4 years full time. And I love it. I do it mainly through online courses, and then I do like one-on-one coaching and masterminds.
I love that. And your branding is like so different.
Thank you. I try. I mean, I think I've always been one of those people that has a hard time, like, if anything is the same, it's not even in a way that I like think it's cringe. It like cripples me if I feel like I'm like the same as someone else. And so it's been really important that like, I feel like I just do it naturally where I'm like, I have to change this. It's all starting to feel the same, so thank you. I take that as a very high compliment.
Yeah, I do love you. I do love your energy. So can we start at the beginning? I always love to ask this question to guests that come on the podcast. So what I'm really interested to know is, how was your upbringing as a little girl? And was there anything that stood out for you, or any lessons that have shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah. So I was the oldest of 6 girls total. So I had 5 little sisters. And I feel like there's something in being the oldest that like you just take on. I mean, and I didn't even have parents, because I've talked to a lot of like my friends who are also the oldest of their family. And I didn't have parents that were super intense of like, you need to be a good example or whatever. They were like, they never pushed that on me. But I feel like when you're the oldest, you just kind of take on a lot because it's fun and it like feels good to like be able to support people. And I honestly feel like it's the reason I do my business now of like coaching. It just feels so natural to me because I was kind of doing that with my sisters growing up. It was just like, we were all really close. We talked about everything together. I was raised in a very like religious household. I was raised Mormon, and I was part of the Mormon church until kind of I got to be an adult. And so that's been the majority of like the reworking of beliefs I've had to do has been about around religion and like how I was raised. But I'm actually really thankful for my parents and the upbringing I had, because they always encouraged individuality. Like it was a really big thing to them. They like, especially my mom, she was really into like us being different. I mean, we all had like pixie haircuts. And that was like not normal for like a family of girls to have pixie haircuts, but she just always like really pushed for us to like stand out. So I'm really thankful for that, because I feel like that's laid the foundation for me feeling confident to like be different in the coaching space.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I remember seeing a post of yours and it was something about beliefs or messaging from religion. I was like, that's super interesting. But now, obviously, knowing about the upbringing, like, it makes sense. So is that something that you see in a lot of your clients, or like in your own experience, those beliefs that you get from religion? Or yeah, it would be religion, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely, I attract a lot of people who, even if they weren't brought up in like Mormon religion, even like very like strict Christianity, a lot of my people come and they have that same thing. I mean, and even I feel like the US is so, it's like built into our culture. It's like purity culture and like all of this shit that I'm like so not down with. So I do feel like all of my clients have some sort of story around those things. And like, I feel like it all comes down to like this really big feeling that like you're not good enough, and that God is something like outside of you, and you can't like trust yourself. And I feel like a lot of those things come from either being raised in like a very Puritan society, and I just think the patriarchy and all of that. So it is definitely something that we have to like reprogram within their businesses, because that shows up a ton. If you feel like you're not good enough and you're like running your business, it's going to be hard to like fully embody who you're wanting to step into.
That's very true. And for out of my curiosity, like, what is Mormon? Is it similar to Christianity? Because I feel like the UK, I know it has pockets, but it's not like, when you've just said it's quite ingrained in the US culture, it's not really like that over here in the UK.
Yeah, you guys are so lucky. I feel like it's like the most toxic thing. But so Mormonism is technically Christianity, but it's very, I mean, in Utah, it's like a cult. I mean, I would almost say like it's like it's so intense the way that they are. And I think a lot of Christianity in the US can feel like that. I don't know about it in other places, but it's very much like if you leave, you're like ostracized. They teach you like that you're going to doubt yourself, and that Satan, like if you ever question any of the beliefs that they're teaching you, they tell you that you're never supposed to like trust that is demons trying to talk to you. And it very much puts men on a pedestal, similar to, I think, other Christianity religions, but it's like there's like this power called the priesthood. That's a really big thing of the Mormon church, and only men can have it. And so everything is like around men have this thing, and you aren't even allowed to want it, or like that's like temptation if you're ever finding yourself wanting that thing. It's really, I mean, there's so much to it. There's also very intense rules, like you can't drink coffee, you can't drink tea, you can't drink alcohol, you like no premarital sex. And it's very intense in the way of like you can't, because I think sometimes like Catholicism and some of the other things I see, it's not, there's rules, but it's not like these rules you have to follow. But this is like, you can't get married if you haven't followed those rules. So it's very much, there's all these different steps of like things you have to do. And the congregation, that's like what they call the like group that's gathering, like there's lots of like different weird words within it, but the big group, they will know if you're breaking the rules. So it's a very shame like inducing type religion. It's intense. It's very like intense.
And honestly, like seeing you on social media, and I get that your authenticity is so like everything you project out is who you are. Even more massive respect for you for like owning that. But did you ever like rebel against it, or want to rebel against it? And how was it being like a young girl growing up in that environment?
Yeah, I felt very like, so when I was growing up, I always have hated being told what to do more than anything in the world. That was like my hardest thing. And so I felt like my devotion to the religion was really the basis of like, I kind of would run these circles around making it make sense in my mind. Where I was like, I'm just focusing on a devotion to like God and Jesus. And like, I kind of would just ignore all the other stuff because I couldn't, it felt so crippling to me, which now I'm like, I knew back then that it like wasn't my truth. But I just would kind of create these stories around like, oh, those are just people within the church. That's not the reality of it. I'm just going to focus on God and like the Bible. And Mormons have like the Book of Mormon. It's like a secondary Bible. And so I just focused on all of that stuff. I was definitely very rebellious to the culture of it. But because it was the culture, it wasn't like, I wasn't breaking rules. I was very strict rule follower in the ways of like, not drinking, none of that. I was like super strict with, but the culture, I feel like I was always challenging that. And I was always challenging like the things that people would say. And I don't know. So I feel like I was always challenging that. That's been a really big part of me. But when I realized the first time I ever questioned it was when I was like in my 20s. And as soon as I questioned it, I was like, holy shit, none of it's true. It's just like everything crumbled for me in a moment. And I think because I was rebelling against the culture and I never bought into like the shame aspect of it. It was a lot easier for me to leave versus there's people, I mean, I have friends in my life, family in my life who like, it's so, looked down upon that they've been faking being in the church for years because they're so afraid to make that transition. And so I feel like the transition was easier for me because my devotion wasn't to the culture or the people. It was like to God. And I was like, oh my God, like there's so many ways that I experience God in my life now that it hasn't even been hard for me to transition out of. But it was definitely hard growing up. And I think as a girl, I mean, it's that thing where you're taught, like you would learn in church about like, you can't show, I mean, the modesty thing is like super intense. Like what clothes you wear is really intense in the religion. And it's like, you can't even show your shoulders because that's going to make guys have negative thoughts. So it was like being raised in that. I do think it created like a lot of stories around even like healthy sexuality as an adult that I've had to rework.
And you know, the bit that resonated was when you were saying, and I think this will probably resonate for a lot of listeners, because I feel like at points we've probably all been in that moment where the truth is there, it's in our awareness, and we're like, I just don't want to pay attention to the truth. So we focus on the things that we can control, or we focus on the things that make things make sense, because at certain times in our lives, we're not ready to face the truth. And when you said that, like, I totally resonated with, and like, I know I've been in that. And do you see that a lot in your clients as well?
Yes. Well, and I think it's like, once we will actually look at the truth of what we're feeling, it's a million times easier. But it's like this, like fighting and creating stories around, like, I'm not going to look at that. I'm not going to look at that because we're afraid of looking at it for whatever reason. But I find that if you'll fully, and not like a half-assed, like pretending to look at it, but like fully look at the truth and be like, no, this is it. Like, this is the thing I'm chasing, or this is the thing I believe. It actually feels easier than ever. It's like the most natural thing once you allow yourself to like believe it or like embody it.
So tell us a little bit about your journey then. How did you go from where you were, and you said like even in your 20s still in this space, to becoming like just a badass business coach? Like what? Like, yeah. But I literally am like, I love women in their power, and I'm a huge advocate for that. I love women who, like, you put a reel up the other day and you were listening to like classical music, but you were just like dancing around, and I was like, just like in her own lane doing her own thing, and I love that. So what has your journey been to getting to this point as a coach?
Yeah, so I actually I've always been really like into like art, and I honestly thought I was going to be an interior designer when I grew up. Like, I was like really into home stuff. And then I found graphic design and I fell in love with it. And so I started working a job just like part-time in high school. I kind of like taught myself after taking a class in high school, and I just fell in love with it. And I did that for, like 10 years. Including the time that I was working in high school. And then I had a moment at my job I was like a creative director. I was loving everything I was doing. It was a beauty company. It was like my dream projects, my dream work environment. It was so fun. I was getting paid a lot of money for like how old I was. I mean, I was getting paid a lot of money in general. And I just looked at the people who I was like looking up towards, who I still love. And like, we still see each other and stay in contact. But I was like, they're miserable. And like, that's who I'm like trying to be. Like, I was looking at like the chief level marketing officer and creative officer and CEO. And I just tried to picture myself in that space. And I was like, I don't think I can like do this. This isn't even my goal. I knew I had always wanted to start my own business. I've always been like very like entrepreneurial. And I feel like I always had been helping my friends start little things. And I had always had random side projects. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And it was like, honestly, looking back at the decision, it kind of stresses me out because I'm like, I can't believe this worked out because I was so blindly confident. Like I had zero plans, zero money saved. I mean, lots of like credit card debt. I was just like jumping off of a cliff. I don't know what, like, I mean, I think it was definitely my higher self that was like, just do it. You'll figure it out. It was also a thing where I was like, I was single. I don't have any kids. I didn't have like, I shared a room, I shared a house with someone. So it was like, I had very low expenses too. So I was like, when else am I going to have this time to like try it? It's only going to get harder. And I feel like that's true for anybody, even if you have like kids or a partner or whatever, like it never gets easier to take those scary leaps. I think there's never a moment that you're like, oh yeah, now it makes sense. It's like, you're going to get more comfortable. Things are going to feel scarier to leave. So I left my job. The first 6 months were like, just scrappy, trying to like make money in any way. They were really stressful, really like hard on my nervous system. But there was a moment that I was like, you know what, like I'm making this work. And I kind of took away the real loftiness of it because I always knew what I wanted it to be. And I still know, like I have like such long-term vision for like what I want my business to feel like. But when I focused too much on like the long term, during that time, it was like I was making 3 to 5K months and I was focusing on 20K months. And I was like, I need to stop focusing on like this huge number outside of my reality because it's just causing me stress. I know I'm searching, like I'm shooting for that. But then when I started focusing on just like creating enough to like build a sustainable life, that's when things really took off for me. And I kind of transitioned so at that point I was just doing graphic design. And then I transitioned into doing like more branding work and marketing. And then I launched a package that was like hybrid, half graphic design, half business coaching. And then from then on forward, I was like, I don't want to do it. The next year I decided I couldn't do design anymore. It was burning me out. And what I really loved was like helping people and coaching people. And so then I started launching courses. It was all very like the journey I feel like was actually pretty smooth. I didn't have any big like, okay, I'm done with all of this. It was all like kind of, I don't know. It felt very like one product morphed into another and it's just continued happening all along my journey. So yeah.
I love that. And I relate to just, maybe it's just something about when you have that like snap moment. But when I was 26, working in the probation service, went to university to study, to like be in that field of work, and just woke up one day and I was like, I'm so done. I was like, I don't want to do it. And now looking back, I'm like, so I went into personal training because I loved fitness. But I remember just now I look back, I just handed my notice in, walked out that office. I had no fucking plan. No clue what I was doing. I'd only just qualified as a PT, so I had like no clients. And I was just like, fucking, I know it's going to work out. It'll be fine. And I think sometimes that like, I want to call it like audaciousness is what we need to just sometimes make the move. Because if you start sitting on it and thinking about it, you're never going to make the move because it just becomes there's too many variables.
100%. And I feel like looking back, I wouldn't have, if I didn't have to do it, like if I didn't have to figure out a way to make money, I would have just kept pushing it off and I wouldn't have done a course and I wouldn't have done this. And it's like that when you have to, even though sometimes it's like intense energy to hold, it puts a fire under your ass to like move forward.
So what is your favorite and least favorite things about being a coach and running a business?
Yeah. So I would say, I mean, I have so many things that I love about it. Like literally, I love the freedom that like I get to do whatever I want. And honestly, my days are like, I'm like so spoiled. Sometimes I like overthink it and I'm like, I don't even realize how lucky I am that like a lot of times we're just like, me and my employees are like hanging out and going to lunch and going to the movies. And like, it's so laid back, which I love because I'm definitely the type of person that like creativity hits me and new ideas hit me when I'm like living my life. It's not when I'm like forcing it to come out. So I love the freedom that I have. I love the people I'm able to meet. And I really love, I like am very introverted and like have a lot of social anxiety, but I feel like with my business having something to talk about with people, because I also like I really like being social and meeting new people. I love the fact that in the entrepreneur space, we always have something to talk about. We always have something in common. Like I love that aspect of it. I've met so many friends through this. Yeah, just traveling all the time, not having to like ask somebody for time off. The freedom aspect to me is everything. And the least favorite thing, I would say it's probably just like balancing the pressure that you feel as a CEO, especially with employees. That's something that I feel like it's just the trade-off. If you want the freedom, you have to be willing to accept the fact that it's on you. Like, and most of the time that's really fun. Like, I love the fact that like, I get to decide how much money I make and I get to decide how many hours I work. But there is times when I have to remind myself to like, it's not all up to me. And like that balance of figuring out how much to take on versus like how much isn't my responsibility, even with my clients, like it's that balance can sometimes be tricky.
Did you ever go through that phase when you first started out as a coach of feeling the need to like give the world to clients?
Yeah. And like feeling like you're responsible for like their results. Like it's like feeling like you have to overgive and overcompensate. And it's like, you have to like hold their hand through their process 100%.
What are some of the, like, I don't like the word failure, so I'm trying to stop using it because I think we either get an outcome that we like or we don't like and we learn a lesson from it. So what are some of those moments in getting to the point where you're at now that you look back and think, yeah, they were hard, but you know, there was some good lessons in them?
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's been a lot of hard times in my business. I feel like mental health has been something that I really struggled with, and I really didn't struggle too bad with it until I started my business. I like got a ton of anxiety, and I think like working a 9 to 5, it just filled my day to the point that like I couldn't even think if I was happy. And so I think having my own business now has been like the biggest thing of like, holy shit, like I wasn't happy a lot of my life. I was faking my happiness a lot of my life. I'm anxious, like all these things. I feel like that's been the biggest thing, that the biggest kind of like battle and like lows that I've had in my business have been related to my mental health. And I'm so glad for my business because I'm like, I wouldn't have ever known this. I would have just like gone throughout life, like thinking I was happy, thinking I was doing what I was, you know, supposed to do for like growth and whatever. So I would say definitely mental health things have been like a big thing to just learn how to work with, not even a way of like overcoming, but just like being like, okay, I'm feeling anxious. This is what's going to help me, or that type of thing.
What do you go to in those moments? So are you, because I'm also like a qualified therapist, so I'm like really big on, you know, people just having therapy and talking, and even as a coach, having a coach or having a therapist, having that like space. So what are some of the things you go to that help you in those moments?
Yeah, I feel like a really big thing is just coming back into my body. So like breath work has been huge, and not even in a way of like, I think sometimes we think breath work, like when I had first heard about it and done it, I had done like these amazing, like 30-minute meditations. But I like think just sometimes like 2 minutes stopping and being like, I'm just going to take deep breaths. Like that has been huge. And it's the simplest thing. But like so often when we're in those moments, it's just like we're in fight or flight and we're like trying to figure out something or overthink our anxiety or whatever. So I feel like focusing on my breath. I also got on like antidepressants at the beginning of this year. And I had like a ton of shame around that. But then I had a friend who, and I had a friend who got on them a couple years ago and it like changed her life. And I honestly feel like it's given me, I'm on like a very low dosage, but it's given me a little bit of a baseline that it feels like I can take the steps to like do the things that are going to make me feel better, like go on a walk or do this or do that. I also am really into plant medicine. So I've like been like kind of doing my own thing there. So I feel like it's a combination of a lot of things, but it's mainly like the tool that I use the most is my breath. And then I do have like some other things that I take that have helped a lot too.
Do you feel like I'm so interested in plant medicine and like I've had the call to do ayahuasca and like, but just could not find a place to do it. And also Liverpool just did not feel like the place. But started having experiences with like cyberselin and mushrooms and stuff. And honestly, it's just been so expansive. And, you know, for people listening to this, maybe thinking, what is that? And if it attracts you or if you know about it, then that's amazing. If you don't, then you maybe don't need to know about it right now. But truly being so expansive.
Yes.
Just to bring me back to myself and my soul.
Yes. I want to force everyone in my life to do them. I know I need to be more like intuitive about it, but I'm like, it's helped me so much. Like I haven't done ayahuasca. I haven't felt the call for that, but I'm like a very big fan of mushrooms. I do them often. I like they do really well in my system. I don't know. I just love them. And I feel like the morning after you doing them, I literally wake up and I feel like I'm choosing my beliefs instead of like those beliefs coming in automatically. It's literally like I'm choosing like, oh, I don't want to believe that anymore. And it just sticks. It's so crazy. Like the work it does on my mindset and subconscious. I've done like acid. I've like microdosed acid it kind of feels like have you ever done LSD before?
No.
It feels like it kind of like Adderall, like it's more masculine. Like I feel like mushrooms feel really feminine to me.
Yeah, they
and
do.
This was like, and LSD was more like a masculine, like a get things done type of thing. Like it's still a psychedelic, but I definitely like mushrooms more because I feel like I had to constantly fight the anxiety of like the extra energy with LSD and microdosing on it. I've also done a few, like I've done like Kana and MSK, but mushrooms are forever my favorite just because I feel like they're like really grounding and like they don't feel scary to me. And I know a lot of people have different experiences with them, but for me, they've been really so expansive.
Yeah. And I always feel like as well, you just get exactly the message that you need from them. So like I've had times where I've had like super intense but like very beautiful experiences, and then I went to a silent retreat on Friday and done them, and there was like no trips, no downloads, but the message was just like, you're exactly where you need to be. And I was just like, so surrendered to it. So like, yeah, I think as well, like if you are interested in doing them, like just like read up about them, watch, there's like a new documentary on Netflix, like learn about them because they are amazing. They are really amazing.
I feel like that helped me have like good trips is just I researched so much before I did it because I was just really interested in it. And I feel like that took the fear out of it for me. It's like seeing like scientists talk about it. I was like, oh my God, this isn't like some weird like thing. It's like there's literally studies behind that like show how good it is for your brain.
And being super intentional, like I always connect and like set an intention or connect to my heart before I do it, and I'm always just and I just come out and I'm just like, oh, there's so much love in the universe. So you do seem super unapologetic. What has been, or how has that process been for you to show up online in that space? Because one thing I was also really didn't expect you to say is that you're quite introverted and have the social anxiety, because online you are so, like I've said a million times, but quite a big energy. So how has that been to show yourself online?
Yeah, it's been definitely a journey. When I like see my like first videos of me talking, I like cringe so hard because I just was like, I was not myself. And I think we see these people that we like look up to or that are good on camera or whatever, and we think they've always been that way. But it's like everything else. It's just something that takes practice of like showing up and learning how to talk and be yourself. It was a really weird transition for me because Instagram for me originally was like, I like posted cute pictures hoping my crushes would see it. And like it was like very much like, I was like thinking about the people who followed me, who I wanted to like text me to hang out. And so it was this weird thing when I switched, because I just turned my personal account to my business account because I was like, I already have people following me here. But it was a really weird thing in the beginning that I felt like I had to show up a certain way. Again, just because I had that like patriarchal like system ingrained in me, but it was like I was always thinking about like the men who followed me and what they were thinking, and like if they were thinking I was sexy, and like this like weird, it was such a weird transition out of that. And then I feel like honestly my biggest, what I've had to step into is like just not giving a shit and realizing that instead of focusing on the people I'm thinking about seeing it and like what they're thinking of me, I've shifted to focus on like, is this going to help somebody today? Like, then I'm going to show up and talk about it. And I still, obviously I'm thinking about if somebody thinks I look cute in a selfie, whatever. I feel like that's like always going to be a thing if you're like in that space, but I'm always just focused on like, okay, am I showing up to like help? Is this going to expand somebody? Like, okay, then I'm going to post it, and like operating from that space and taking myself out of like the self-centered space and like moving into like, no, I know this is going to help somebody make more money. So I'm going to show up and talk about it.
Don't you find it's like harder as well when you try and show up and be like fit some mold or do something like if I ever tried to do that in the early days, I would just stutter on camera or I could never post. And then as soon as I just showed up and I was like, said what I wanted to say in the way that I wanted to say it, it was just so much easier. But do you feel like self-love plays a part in you showing up? And also interestingly as well, acceptance or some level of acceptance with your body, because as women, a lot of people that I speak to, it's like the fear is there around that type of stuff. And for you, have they made a difference in terms of showing up?
Oh my God, 100%. I would say like that's the biggest thing that's been really important for me is like falling in love with myself and choosing myself, not from a space of like, because I went through I had a really traumatic relationship that ended in 2018, right? When like a few months after I started my business. And honestly, it's like the best thing that ever happened to me because I found myself and I had to choose myself and I had to like fall in love with myself for the first time and trust myself, what felt like for the first time. And I feel like that's my most important thing when I'm not feeling good in my business is most of the time I'm not loving myself and I'm not like choosing me. And so I feel like that's the first place I come when I'm not wanting to show up is I'm like, how can I make myself feel good? How can I, again, even like, I feel like asking yourself how you can get back in your body. I feel like that's like the biggest form of self-love. Like instead of existing outside, it's like existing inside. I feel like that's been really huge. And as far as body stuff goes, that was definitely I grew up like always chubby and I was always on a diet, and my dad was like always had issues with his weight. And so he was always on a diet on and off. And I've really gone through my own relationship with like health and like just not, I don't know, like not allowing it to hold me back in any way. And there was definitely times that I was showing up in a way that I was like, oh, like you can see my double chin, I got to change the angle or whatever. And it came to a time that I was just like, what am I hiding from anyone? First of all, people see me in real life and like, they know what I look like. And it's not like, I felt like it was this weird thing, even dressing where I was like, if I was like, never used to wear like tight fitting things. I would just wear oversized things. And I'm like, what am I hiding? Like, it just was this, I noticed this energy and I didn't even realize I was doing it, where I was like hiding myself without realizing it, thinking it's what I was supposed to do, or it was going to get me further in life or whatever. And it was doing the exact opposite. When you're like hiding behind something, whether it's an outfit or like a certain angle or whatever, you're going to be hiding yourself and like repelling everything that you want from you. And so now I just notice like anytime I'm feeling insecure, I just tell myself like, quit hiding, like come back in your body. And like, everyone knows who you are. Like people see me in real life. And so it's like, I'm not trying to trick anyone. I feel like I've focused a lot on body love, just being like integrity. Like, this is who I am. And like, if you're not interested in that, like, that's not my problem. But it's been a lot of like I think just mindset work, releasing those thoughts of like, I need to hide or I need to lose weight to like be worthy of what I'm trying to create.
Yeah, I love that. So relate to it as well. It's like I used to, back in my PT days of being lid fit, my validation was 100% from like Instagram pictures, very over sexualizing myself. And at the time didn't realize it was because I was so unhappy. And it fits that like cliche of you look like how you have always wanted to look on the outside, and still I was just so unhappy on the inside. And it just gets exhausting when you're constantly thinking about angles and posting and how many likes that picture's got and how can I make myself look a little bit more sexy to get the views. And just one day it was like a revelation of like, what am I even like what is even happening? And like that was very much tied into my spiritual awakening. And then from that point I was just like, fuck this, like no.
Yeah. I'm so thankful for those moments. It feels like it happens in that way. It's like how both of us, like we just wanted to quit our jobs. It's like a moment that like clarity strikes you and you're just like, what the hell am I like doing with all of this? Because I feel like those are the times that like things shift. It's like a snap back into like who we want to be.
And it's like I always say to people, like everybody has those moments and everybody has that inside of them. It's just whether we choose to see them and act on them. Or the universe is always leaving you breadcrumbs, like I say. It's just whether you choose to follow them or not. So another little side hustle you've got is the CEO Club. I love the hoodie that you've got, and the stuff is like so cool. So how did that come about, having another business?
Yeah. So I feel like CEO Club just started as something that I was like, I wanted another creative outlet where it wasn't like directly related to me showing up and having to talk. I mean, I don't think I'll ever do graphic design again for other people. I still do it in my business, but it's such a big part of like what brings me joy is like creating things. And so I started creating just like sweatshirts and different things, hats for people who were in my courses, and people really wanted to buy them. And so I ended up just kind of creating this side thing. And I feel like now it's literally like a place that I can put my creativity when it feels fun. Maybe one day it would be something where it's like a big focus, but I feel like keeping it as a place, it almost feels like a hobby business. Like, it's like, I kind of lost that is because before when I was working design, everything I did on Instagram or things I was selling felt like a hobby. And I actually really miss that because I think there's a part of that. It's just like for fun and there's no like expectations around it. So I feel like it's just this kind of like side thing where it's like, I get to explore, I get to play. There's no like trying to keep my employees paid or whatever. Like it all follows under my own brand. So it's like, I just get to have fun over there. And so it's been really fun.
I love that. And one of the other things that I thought was like really interesting that I saw you talk about was you talk a lot about debt, and like I've never seen a coach talk about that online, and I just think it's super interesting in your perspective. So can we just talk a little bit about that? Like, why do you talk about that as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever worked with somebody who doesn't have some sort of limiting belief around debt or have some sort of debt that they're like trying to pay off, whether it's student loans or credit cards or whatever. And I'm just the type of person that like, I feel like I can see, it almost feels like shame is an energy to me that I can like see holding people back. I think shame, it like gets its like claws on us and it just drags us down and we feel like we can't move and we feel like overwhelmed and hopeless. And it's just like the worst energy possible. And everybody who I talk to has some sort of feeling around debt and like shame around having it or having had it, or maybe having it sometime in the future. And to me, debt, I mean, if you talk to people who are like extremely wealthy, they use debt to their advantage. Like, I think there's this weird story within like lower and middle class where like debt probably does hold a lot of people back, like actually in the terms of like what it is, not even from the shame factor, but like they have this idea that to become wealthy, they have to have no debt. And I think that alone is holding them back from like creating this villain out of this thing that like they can create wealth and then pay off the debt. So that's how my process was. I was getting so stuck in like having debt and credit cards and felt like I couldn't get ahead of it. And there was a moment where I was just like, I'm going to focus on paying the payments. I'm not going to ignore it, because I went through the whole thing of being like, I'm afraid of this. I'm not going to ignore it. I got behind on payments. I couldn't pay them when I was starting my business. Then there was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to set this up for automatic payments. I'm going to focus on building my business, because obviously my goal with my business isn't getting rich quick. I want to build a business that can last me forever. And then my business got to a place where like I had a ton of extra income. And so then literally the debt I had been stressing out about for years and years and years, I paid it off in 1 month. But it wasn't because I was focusing on paying off the debt. It's like I had let it become something that was just automatically paying itself off in the background. But then there became a moment where, because I was focused on making more money instead of like the energy of debt and how it was holding me back and all this shame around it, I was able to make more money instead of creating more of the same like lack stories. And honestly, I feel like it's a place where I like to hold looking at whenever I've gotten in debt, or if I spend money that I don't have or whatever. I feel like you hear stuff where it's like so shameful about that. But I like to look at that version of me who went into credit card debt and like show her so much love. And like, she was doing the best she could. She was literally doing the best she could. Maybe she spent a lot of money on concerts and clothes, and maybe it wasn't necessities, but actually it was. And like, it made me happy. And I'm glad now that this version of today me can like pay for those things that she spent back there and had like so much fun. So I feel like I like to just soften everything around debt and be like, it's just money, and it's deciding future you is going to pay it off, which isn't always. I feel like there also becomes a moment when you have to be like, okay, I'm done with this story and I don't want this anymore. But it's okay in the moment to like soften that around it, because coming from a place of shame is never going to like help you move past it.
No, never. Also, what's your perspective on, because I feel like from what I first observed when I became a coach, and, you know, when I had conversations with coaches, like a big thing that was said to me on coaching calls was like, put it on a credit card, or can you take a loan out? And I remember even when I started off as a coach, it was advised for me to say that to people. And now I look back and I think, oh, like saying that on a call just feels like so icky. So what's your perspective on that? Do you feel like sometimes people or women with, you know, dreams in business can put things on a credit card and it be from a space of abundance?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that's like the yuckiest thing. And I hate that that's something that's like talked about, like that people teach you to say. I just feel like that feels like so yucky, and like it feels manipulative to me.
Yeah,
It doesn't feel good. But here's what I think about it. I mean, honestly, there's been so many times I've made investments in my business that like I didn't have the money, but I knew it was the next right step. And so I feel like I come from a space where I trust my customers to make the decision that's right for them. And so I'm not going to tell them to like, I'm not going to tell them they need this thing, or this is the next right step, or they have to have this thing to be successful. I'm just going to tell them about my thing. And if they want to invest in it, they can choose how they want to invest in that. If they do end up putting it on a credit card, I've done that too. I've literally done that so many times in my business, but it's never going to come from a space of me feeling like I need to convince them to spend money they don't have for me to make money. And like, I just feel like that feels like, I mean, it just feels like really grossly manipulative to me. So I feel like what I like to focus on is just trust in my customers. And I feel like that manifests them being able to have trust in themselves. And a lot of times people will say, hey, like, I actually don't think this is the right fit for me. And in the beginning, that used to like really be like, oh, like, am I not good enough? Why are they not wanting to invest? And now I'm just in the vibe of like, I'm going to attract the exact right people that are going to have good results from my programs. I don't have to focus on like sales tactics to get them to say yes to me or whatever. I don't want the people who like I had to talk into like signing with me.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I put investments on credit cards, and like when I first started out, and it felt like super scary. And then it was like going against everything that, because credit card and debt for me was always like holiday or clothes, or so then to actually put something for me in my future, like an investment on a credit card, that whole process was like super interesting as well. I was like, it's weird what this is bringing up. But me being able to make that investment resulted in me essentially kickstarting my business. So yeah, I totally agree. But I would never suggest the client do that.
Yeah. It just feels like it's like, I like to also feel like I have boundaries within, like, I don't want to feel like everybody is like depending on me in a certain way that like, if I talked somebody into it, then all of a sudden I feel like a difference. It's like a cord tied to me, but I'm like, I can't have like thousands of cords tied onto me. Like, choose this, I'll show up and provide what I want, like what I promised you. But it just feels like a different sort of energetic attachment if you're like talking people into like putting it on a credit card or something. And then it feels like they're like how you said, like it took a different level of like trust in yourself to invest and put it on a credit card. It feels like if you're talking people into putting something on a credit card, you're asking them to trust you. Like it's almost turning their trust onto you. And then it's just a weird dynamic for me.
Yeah. And it also, like, I was speaking to someone today about like an offer, and she was talking about signing up, and I was like, I want you to always sign up from the space of abundance. And when I started out as a coach, didn't understand the difference in that. I remember actually like on early sales calls, I would say to clients, like it would just naturally come out, but I'd be like, do you trust me? Because of the teachings that I was getting at the time. And now I look back and I think so much attachment, and actually investments could have been made from a space of lack. And it's just very interesting how there's so much energetics, like so many unspoken things around the things that go down on like investments and calls and all of that stuff. But it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like it's just, we have to like hold, like, realizing that we all did stuff we didn't like. It's like, that's kind of another really hard thing about business is like looking back and being like, oh, like I regret that thing that I did, or this thing that I launched or whatever. But I feel like that's just the name of the game. Like we're going to do stuff that actually might be shitty. And like, we look back and we're like, I actually wish I hadn't done that. But that's like growth. And I feel like too, as you've grown and like stepped into like fully like allowing your clients to invest from abundance instead of lack and all this stuff, like that's inspiring for people to see. People don't want to just see a perfect coach pop up out of nowhere. It's like our clients are coming to us because they've been able to witness our growth too along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And lastly, last question, what's a lesson you wish you were taught as a little girl that you had to figure out on your journey?
I think I mean, there's a lot, but I feel like the biggest thing I really had to work on is like not tying my trust, like allowing it to come from within. I feel like that would have saved me like so much heartache. And realizing that like I'm the only person that I need validation from. I mean, I grew up like I said, like it was very focused on like getting a man's attention and like you wanted to get married early and blah, blah, blah. And so I feel like I've always been searching like for the validation of men. Or then when I went into coaching, it was like the validation of the numbers and like just all these external things, like validating my internal worth. So I wish I could just tell like little girl Kinzie, like, you're good. You're perfect as you are right now. Like you can trust yourself. There's nobody outside of you who needs to tell you that you can trust yourself. I feel like that would have saved me a lot of heartache.
I love that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I know, yeah, I certainly can. So thank you so much for being on the episode. Where can people find you and how could they work with you?
Yes. So everything goes down on my Instagram. So my Instagram is just Kinzie Madsen. It's KinzieMadsen. And I always have like some sort of like program open up. I have a few different programs. I have some on like branding and some on just like overall business. And then I have a mastermind and one-on-one coaching. So there's lots of different ways.
That's epic. Thank you so much.
Yes,
it's been a pleasure.
You.